Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Thanks, Alexis. So why colleges and universities specifically as anchor institutions? When we think about anchors, again, we're thinking about place-based institutions that have a vested interest in their surrounding communities and also have an extraordinary amount of resources that can be put forth as partners in these surrounding neighborhoods. But colleges and universities, public and private, of all sizes, all play crucial and multifaceted roles in their surrounding communities. And we're talking about as educators, as real estate developers, as purchasers, as hires and job developers, as cultural centers. So simply put, what a university or college does or doesn't do has an impact on its surrounding community. So let me talk a little bit about the process that Penn has been going through over the last 30 or so years, and it really has been an evolving process and continues to be so. But the work really began in the 1980s, and that was under the administration of Sheldon Hackney at the time. We've been very fortunate to have a series of very supportive presidents at the University of Pennsylvania. But in the 80s, under Hackney's reign, we essentially, Penn started taking a different look at its role in the community, and not seeing itself so separate from, but as this future that was indeed intertwined with its surrounding community. And so it was in the mid 80s that, out of the work of what's now known as the Netter Center, a group called the West Philadelphia Improvement Corps started an opportunity to do community revitalization, partner our students and faculty with community members and youth from the community to improve the area. The Penn Program for Public Service was then started in the late 80s, which was the direct predecessor to the Center for Community Partnerships, which was then founded in 1992 as a university-wide center, very intentionally with the name Partnerships in the title. We were trying to make a statement that we were here as partners. It was going to be about the benefit both to the university and to the community itself. And so as noted here, a new foundation was really laid for this relationship with West Philadelphia and the broader city as a whole. But despite these partnerships that were happening on the ground beginning in the 1980s, by about the mid-1990s, and we were under new presidential leadership at that time, University City area, which is the immediate area of West Philadelphia surrounding Penn's campus, had really deteriorated significantly. We had lost a lot of population, which was directly in relation to extreme crime that was happening around campus, blighted properties, high vacancies in both residential and commercial area. Residential area was largely rental. We had surface parking lots covering all the streetscape, and so people were fleeing and moving to the city. We then also had two significant cases happen, which were violent murders that happened on campus among Penn graduate students, and one was a graduate student and one was a faculty member. And this is what really sort of took the next step to have an administrative response to what was going on in the community. So under President Judy Rodin at the time in 1994, she established what was known as the West Philadelphia Initiatives. And this was a multi-pronged approach to say that we simultaneously have to address all of these areas in order to really make a difference in the community. The Netter Center continued to be a significant partner in this effort, both in neighborhood planning processes, as well as continuing a lot of our work that was happening on the ground in schools and other community partnerships, which I'll be talking a little bit more about in a minute. So to walk through kind of what these initiatives have specifically meant and how they are, what they look like today, we'll take them kind of one at a time. So first, looking at creating safe and secure neighborhoods. This was sort of a cornerstone of the entire West Philadelphia initiatives. Essentially, the idea here was that the area could not thrive without being safe and secure. So that was really one of the first focal areas. Penn created a special services district called the University City District, having the other major anchor institutions in the area agree to establish this standalone 501c3 that would be responsible for helping to clean and green the area. And that's what its initial focus was. And essentially by planting trees, by setting up lighting, by having a new police force in the area that was working alongside city police, we created a safer environment, began to create a safer environment, and really signaled that change was on the way. I'll talk a little bit about how University City District has evolved today and expanded its mission as we get to that focal area. The second big area was around housing and stabilizing home ownership and the housing stock. So Penn established, actually it had been in place for a while, but it ramped up its enhanced mortgage program, which was an opportunity to provide grants to faculty and staff as an incentive to live in the West Philadelphia area. Penn created a fund to secure several hundred units of apartments at the below market price to ensure there would be increased equity and mixed income housing available for existing residents as well. They've recently expanded that footprint of the area that's covered by the enhanced mortgage program to include a wider geographic area of West Philadelphia, and that includes more of the staff from both the university and hospital. A third major prong was investing in public education. As some of you may be familiar with, as part of the West Philadelphia initiatives, Penn worked in partnership with the school district to actually build a new school that's known as the Penn Alexander School. It made a major investment to take land that Penn already owned and turned it into this new beautiful building, and also they continue to provide an additional stipend per pupil each year to keep class size low. So while that being said, what the Netter Center concentrates on is we have been working on an approach called University Assisted Community Schools with traditional neighborhood schools throughout West Philadelphia. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in a minute, but I just wanted to make a note that as Penn saw its work investing in public education, it had both this focused on continuing to work with the traditional public schools while also building this new neighborhood school to have a state-of-the-art school for the staff and faculty it was attracting to the area. Commercial development, another major prong of the West Philadelphia initiatives. What's important to note here is that essentially Penn chose to prime the market with its own funds, investing over $150 million to then attract private development, which was a gamble at the time, but has since well paid off, attracting private developers and investment of over $700 million since it began this effort in the mid-90s. There is a mandate for the participation of local and minority and women-owned businesses in this development, and I'll turn to that actually next, because that is part of our overall economic inclusion plan. So local workforce development was the final prong of the West Philadelphia initiatives. We now think of this as a much wider vision under the idea of economic inclusion, which Penn has a very focused effort on. And essentially this is focused on both hiring and purchasing locally, as well as workforce development itself. So under Buy Local, this has been an effort going on for quite some time, where Penn has focused its purchasing power on choosing suppliers that are right here in West Philadelphia, and really working with those suppliers to actually build up their capacity so that they can do work, they can do business with large institutions like Penn and the other anchors in the area. At this point, you can see the statistics here in most recent fiscal year recorded that we spent about $122 million, which was with local-based vendors, and that's about approximately 13% of Penn's total purchasing, which is a little over $1 billion a year in purchasing goods and supplies. Hiring locally, there has been a focus as well on both hiring diverse candidates as well as hiring local candidates from the surrounding zip codes. And in particular, while the overall makeup of employees of Penn and its health system remains lower than we would like, in recent years, there's been a significant focus on new hires coming from the local area. And we've been pleased to see that because that's something that the Netter Center has been pushing for quite some time. There's a specific effort to also engage minority-owned vendors. So we actually have a requirement for all contracts of $5 million or more that 25% of those contracts be given to minority or women-owned vendors. And there's actually an independent auditor who follows up on those pieces on a regular basis to make sure that our contractors and then the subcontractors are complying with that that requirement. And finally, I mentioned that the work of the University City District has greatly expanded in recent years. So while the initiative largely started in the mid-90s as a clean and green focus, over the last handful of years, they've taken on a broader vision to really focus on economic development in the local area. And what's particularly exciting about this work is an effort that started in 2010 called the West Philadelphia Skills Initiative. This effort takes unemployed residents from West Philadelphia and does just-in-time training for jobs that have been identified at not only Penn, but all of the anchor institutions in the area. So the University City District is working specifically with Penn, its health system, Drexel, and other universities of the sciences, other businesses and anchors in the area to determine where are their hiring needs going to be in the immediate period. And then they provide both hard and soft skill training for those positions. Over the last 5 years, while this work's been underway, I believe they've trained just over 600 individuals who on average have been unemployed for 53 weeks coming into this program, and they have a 90% job placement rate. So it's been a very successful effort that has taken collaboration among multiple anchors with University City District at the lead. So to turn now to kind of where we are at Penn, the Penn Compact was established in 2004 when our now president, President Amy Gutman, came into office. She set forth this vision for Penn, really focusing on three key areas of focus. One was about increasing access for all outstanding students, regardless of their background. Two was about integrating knowledge to address complex problems. And three was engaging locally and globally. We see all of these efforts as very significant for the work of the Netter Center, which again, I'll be speaking a little bit more about in a minute. But particularly our work, of course, is focused on local engagement. And what President Gutman now talks about under her Penn Compact 2020 is how this local engagement leads to impact both for the campus and for our community. What's significant about the work that's happened under all three presidents I've mentioned from the 1980s forward, and especially under the vision of President Gutman and her Penn Compact, is that we really integrated into the academic mission of Penn. And what you might remember as I started from at the beginning, the rationale for this work. None of this is possible if we're not also helping further the mission of our core mission as an institution for research, teaching, learning, and service. And so with that, the Netter Center, again, as mentioned, was founded in 1992 with the idea of galvanizing Penn's resources from across the entire institution to help address these complex problems in West Philadelphia, with the idea that it would benefit not only the community, but also the university, the surrounding city, and the society as a whole. Our primary vehicle for realizing that mission is through academically based community service. This is our bread and butter at the Netter Center. Academically based community service is the integration of service with research, teaching, and learning. Essentially, we build this service into core courses at the university across all different departments and disciplines. And this is really not just about traditional service learning, because it's really about making a significant difference in the local community through ongoing projects. We particularly take a community and collaborative problem-solving approach, engaging youth in particular, grades K through 20 plus, working together on an iterative problem-solving process, trying to make a significant difference in the local schools and in the community as a whole. Faculty and student reflection is obviously a very key part, and the mutual benefit of not only enhancing our research and teaching at on campus and the students learning themselves, but also preparing them as the next civic leaders in the community. And just to give you a sense over time, because we've been at this for quite a while, when the center was formally founded in the early 90s, we had just 3 or 4 of these courses with about 100 students involved. We now offer somewhere between 60 and 70 of these courses each year in about 25 or so different departments, and engage 1,600 Penn students, working both at the undergraduate and graduate and professional level, working in partnership with the community. This is just a few examples of how this work has sort of manifested over time through faculty-led projects, faculty through their disciplinary expertise, then working with faculty from other disciplines on thematic areas focused on health and nutrition, focused on college access and career readiness, focused on STEM education, focused on young children's literacy, and arts, culture, and humanities. So we've developed programs over time which have still been led by faculty, and then we have been able to bring on staff and additional partners through grants focused on these different themes. So how we see this work all coming together in the community is through the development of university-assisted community schools. This has been a framework we've been working on for the last 20 or so years, and it really comes out of the work of John Dewey and Jane Addams, and the work of Jane Addams and Settlement House leaders to focus on schools as social centers and focus on creating hubs for community engagement and improvement. So the idea that we work with traditional public schools in West Philadelphia to, we serve as the key partners to bring in all of the resources of the community and other partners, as well as surface the many resources that are available at these schools and among the youth and families that are served there. And the idea is that the schools by design would be open before and after school, during the weekends, and throughout the year, not only serving the educational needs of the youth there, but also serving the comprehensive needs of their families and the wider community. To provide all those services, you do need lots of other resources, and we see universities as the key partners in providing those resources. And we do that primarily through the academically based community service courses that I mentioned just a moment ago. And again, we see all of this as a mutually beneficial approach. We're working on improving the quality of life and the community and the quality of learning in these local schools, while also advancing the research, teaching, and learning here on campus. So we focus on 2 high schools and their feeder patterns in West Philadelphia, and through that we're working with about 3,000 K-12 students and their families right now. And we have students, the Penn students and faculty get involved not only through the academically based community service courses, but also through multiple volunteer opportunities, academic internships, work study opportunities, and things of the like. So just to turn, for example, and give a totally different but related example from one of our partner institutions here over on the East Coast still, is Rutgers University Newark, who has really taken a very specific focus in recent years on developing an anchor institution agenda under the leadership of President Nancy Cantor. So their most recent strategic plan developed in 2014 has these 5 prongs that are really focused on an anchor approach of integrating their academic and economic resources to address these major areas that they see of need in Newark, which is a very distressed city, as you might know. So they focused on strong educational pathways, creating healthy and safe neighborhoods, leveraging arts and culture, the science and STEM education in the urban environment, and entrepreneurship and economic development. So as you can see, very similar type of work as the work that Penn has been doing over the last 30 or so years, as far as the multiple prongs that we're trying to address in our community of West Philadelphia. Just to give 2 examples of work that's now underway by Rutgers University Newark, the Newark City of Learning Collaborative is a coalition of more than 60 cross-sector partners that is co-convened and co-led and supported by the university, by Rutgers University Newark. They are working to raise the college attainment rate in Newark from 17% to 25% by the end of 2025. So that's an example of an effort that they have convened many partners around, and are serving as a co-convener and a leader for. Another effort is the Safer Newark Council, which is a public-private nonprofit collaborative that has been convened by the Office of the Mayor, Rutgers University Newark, as well as local corporate and philanthropic partners. And they are working to develop an evidence-based citywide public safety strategy. So then, to talk beyond a little bit of these specific examples shared, The Netter Center has always seen as part of its core work, trying to help build networks of other higher education institutions doing similar work in their local communities. Our thought here is every university and college in its local community is how we can begin to make a difference across the nation and even across the globe. So with that, we have been involved in helping to develop networks of other higher ed institutions doing this type of work locally, regionally, nationally, and even globally. So regionally, we have the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development. This was actually formed before the Netter Center was even founded in 1985 as a partnership between Penn, Temple, and LaSalle. Our director of the Netter Center, Ira Harkavy, is the founding chair of that organization, which now represents about 30 or so colleges and universities in greater Philadelphia that's working on a variety of initiatives of partnering higher eds with their local schools and communities. And there is particularly a K-16 network focus within that work. The University Assisted Community Schools Network is actually something we've been working on for quite a while to, as interest has developed and grown around the approach we have of university assisted community schools, which I spoke about just a few minutes ago. We have worked on actually supporting different institutions to adapt this approach to their local institution and community, and have had a variety of grants and opportunities to support some of those institutions in doing such adaptation. Most recently, when we were endowed as the Netter Center in 2007, we began an approach of developing regional training centers on university-assisted community schools on 3-year cycles. So we've actually had 3 regional training centers. The first one at the University of Oklahoma, Tulsa, that has now built the Higher Education Forum of Northeastern Oklahoma. And the second one was at the Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, IUPUI, in Indianapolis, which has built an amazing Midwest Center on university-assisted community schools. And then right now, the University of Connecticut in Hartford is wrapping up its 3-year cycle of building a New England resource center for university-assisted community schools. There is a network that talks on a monthly basis that's connected to the work of the Coalition for Community Schools, and I can share more information on that with anybody interested, because we welcome members from any institution who's interested in this approach to join those monthly calls. The Anchor Institutions Task Force is a major effort that has been underway since 2009. This group was initially started in order to, Dr. Harkavy was asked to convene a group of academics and practitioners on the approach of how higher eds and medical institutions could help inform the work of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This was just as the Obama administration was coming into office in late 2008 and early 2009. Out of that group and a set of recommendations that were provided to HUD, the initial task force decided they wanted to continue as an ongoing think tank and advocate for the work of anchor institutions. And so this group has developed over time so that now there's about 650 individual members, not only representing higher education institutions, and they actually are representing themselves as individuals. You join as an individual member, not as an institution, but also an increasing number of academic medical centers and hospitals, community foundations, developers that are involved in this work, corporate foundations that are involved in this work, and other groups that are interested in the work of anchors. But very importantly, this has been very much a values-based movement. So members join by simply signing up, but they join with full agreement in the belief of the values that the Anchor Institutions Task Force has put forth. And these values, as laid out on the screen here, are collaboration and partnership, equity and social justice, democracy and democratic practice, and commitment to place and community. The idea here is that we're really trying to promote that anchors are not just about being place-based institutions and how you invest your money, but it's really about an active commitment to reducing the disparities seen in our surrounding communities, the communities surrounding our campuses and these anchor institutions, and really about engaging in mutually beneficial and democratic partnerships along the way. If you're interested in that, I can also speak a little bit more about that at the end, but I do want to mention that the Anchor Institutions Task Force does have its national conference coming up on Friday, November 11th in New York City, and I welcome any of you who are interested to look into joining us for that meeting. We have a very exciting agenda lined up. Finally, on the global front, I just want to mention the International Consortium for Higher Education, Civic Responsibility, and Democracy, which the Netter Center has been partnering with or helped found in 1999 in partnership with the Council of Europe. And this is a global effort focused on the democratic practice of higher education institutions in partnership with their communities. And they have increasingly also taken a direct focus on the work of anchor institutions and the role that higher eds in Europe and globally can play as anchor institutions in their surrounding community. And now I want to turn to make the point that despite great progress made at Penn, at Rutgers University, Newark, and many other institutions who have engaged in an anchor approach, the work really is very much a work in progress. I mean, we know when we look at the state of the conditions in our surrounding communities, and we look at the extreme disparities that exist right off of our campuses, extreme levels of poverty, unequal schooling, and poor healthcare, that much more work needs to be done. I worked on a piece with Steve Dubb of the Democracy Collaborative in 2012. We put out a book called The Road Half Traveled, University Engagement at a Crossroads, that spoke directly to this point. We selected 10 case studies, diverse set of public and private institutions across the country who were leading efforts with an anchor approach, and tried to kind of capture what had been done, what were some of the lessons learned, and what more needed to be done. And essentially, again, we found great work happening on the ground. We found some great lessons being learned, but we were trying to add it up about what was needed to move the work to the next level. And so we came up with the idea of an anchor institution mission, which was really taking the work to the next level on a campus-wide cultural shift, making a strategic reorientation of how the campus engages with its community, and also the opportunity to move beyond just promising practices that might have academic partnerships or economic partnerships involving the institutional side of the work or the academic or partnership side of the campus, and really to talk about engaging the full set of resources across the entire institution in a strategic place-based approach, really focused on mutual benefit for maximum impact and sustainability. Without that focus, the danger really is that institutions can inadvertently lead to growing stratification in our communities and in our society. So now to turn to some of our key lessons learned. This work is really hard to happen without having the leadership of the institution. So as mentioned, we've been very fortunate to have great leadership at the University of Pennsylvania. The other cases that we have covered we covered through the Road Half Traveled, had great leadership, even though some of that leadership turns over. So while having presidential support is important, it's also very important to have the leadership of key faculty members. Faculty are often the individuals who have the longest standing tenure at an institution, as you all know, but also having other senior level administrators that buy in and can really help support this idea, embedding it into the culture of the institution. And to that point, as I've mentioned from the very beginning, it's been key to see this work as it speaks to the core mission of the institution itself, so that it's not just seen as add-on work, but that it's really embedded into the core of what we do. So again, that's why the Netter Center's focus has been on the work of academically based community service, integrating service into research, teaching, and learning on campus. 3, as I just mentioned, with the idea of an anchor institution mission, really engaging the full range of institutional resources, not only the human and academic and cultural side of things, but also the economic side, looking at a university or college as a purchaser, as a real estate developer, really looking at as from the institutional set of resources, sometimes thinking about them as corporate resources and money that's going to be spent and spending it in a very intentional way and strategy that complements the other side of the partnership work. I've been mentioning this as well, that the focus really has to be focused on mutual benefit, democratic engagement, and democratic partnerships to make the work sustainable, to have the open kind of dialogue and understanding that you need with the community, and to create this work for sustainability. 5 is really around the idea that there has to be sort of the organizational setup within an institution itself to really help sustain this work over time. So we have seen at multiple campuses that the work really gets deeply rooted both on the ground and at the institution when there's a focused effort with individuals or a center that is responsible for this work. That center can look in a lot of different ways. The framework and the administration behind it can look very different on different campuses, but having some kind of organizational unit has been key to this work being sustained. When we're talking about anchor work, we are often talking about aligning with plans that are going on among other institutions and among city and other partners in the area. And so identifying common planning opportunities so that the work can really be strategic, especially when we look at opportunities for things like real estate development and commercial development, and as well as local job hiring, as well as local hiring and job development. Another big piece is around developing strategic multi-anchor and cross-sector coalitions. I raised some of those specific examples from Rutgers Newark and some of the work they have underway, but also that's the type of work that the University City District is doing here in West Philadelphia by bringing together the different anchors as well as the local businesses and residents themselves in a cross-sector approach to local community and economic development. Another lesson learned has been about actually learning from these best practices, learning from other people's trials on the ground, from each other and from national networks. And this is part of the work that we are attempting to do through those various regional, national, and global networks that I mentioned. And for today's topic, particularly the work of Anchor Institutions Task Force that is putting out the latest literature and best practices and information around different institutions, hospitals, universities, and other anchors, and their approaches to community and economic development. With any of this work, it has been very important to have very clear communication. So defining expectations and responsibilities, setting the right tone and expectations for both the campus and community. When Steve Dubb and I were doing the work around the country, looking at other institutions, we found that this was a big emphasis among a lot of administrators, that they didn't always realize that that communication had to be so clear both on campus to their internal constituents in addition to the external constituents. So looking at things like the social rate of return on investment as looking at a broader vision for the engaging in this type of work and some of the time that it really takes to see some of these results. Which brings me to kind of the last key lesson learned here, which is the idea that with the situation that we see, especially in many of our urban communities, but in many of the communities surrounding our various campuses, we have to act now. We have to address these situations that we see in our communities. So acting with a sense of urgency, but also being focused and patient, because change in culture, especially institutional culture, as you all know, does take time. And so with that, I'll just conclude with quotes from Penn's founder. It's hard for me to represent Penn and not present some quotes from Benjamin Franklin, our founder. In 1749, Ben Franklin founded the University of Pennsylvania with the idea that the great aim and end of all learning was preparing individuals with an inclination joined with an ability to serve mankind, one's country, friends, and family. Unfortunately, that's well, fortunately, that's a vision that we still carry forward today and are trying to implement. But unfortunately, Franklin himself never saw that vision carried out. His business carried him to Europe, and unfortunately the trustees of what became the University of Pennsylvania never carried out his actual vision. And so when he looked back on the work 40 years later in 1789, he said that unfortunately, mankind has an unaccountable prejudice in favor of ancient customs and habitudes. And this is something that I'm sure you all are very familiar with working on your own campuses, that unfortunately the legacy of the ivory tower and the legacy of cultural norms at institutions have put us in a difficult spot of overcoming those traditions so that we can really put in place strategic partnerships on the ground. But we see the work of approaches like the Anchor Institutions Task Force and the work that its many members represent, the work of activity like university-assisted community schools and academically based community service as approaches to overcoming those ancient customs and habitudes and starting to make a difference on campus and in the community. So thank you very much. I look forward to questions that you might have.
Sorry, I was on mute there. We do have one request to have those quotes from Benjamin Franklin shared in writing at some point.
Sure.
I had a couple questions, and as others have them, they can type them into the question and answer section on the toolbar at the bottom. I noticed, Rita, that you didn't use the word reciprocity, and so I'm curious if that was intentional. I noticed you used the word democratic partnerships, etc., but I was just curious if that's intentional, and if so, why you and your colleagues have made that choice, or the choice to use the language that you do use.
That's a great question, Alexis. Thank you. The way we've envisioned our work, and perhaps it could be best illustrated through example, is really through this collaborative problem-solving approach that I mentioned, which has built into it a democratic approach. And what I mean by that is engaging the partners on both sides from the very beginning of the process, from identifying the problem, to promoting a possible solution, to testing out that solution, and then figuring out what works and evaluating that solution, and then going back to the drawing board. So that has been our very intentional focus, with the idea that it would be mutually beneficial to partners involved. I think an example might be helpful here. So our largest program that we now run at the Netter Center is called the Agatston Urban Nutrition Initiative. This work actually began at going back to the very early 90s. Dr. Harkavy engaged Frank Johnston, who was a well-known anthropologist whose work was focused on issues of malnutrition in Guatemala. He approached him because we had been working in partnership with the local schools of West Philadelphia, and the lead teacher partners there had identified issues of nutrition and issues of childhood and obesity as one of a major area they were concerned with. So we approached Dr. Johnston to consider turning his work and his focus from Guatemala to here in West Philadelphia. And that's exactly what he did. So this was one of the original academically based community service courses. So the undergraduate students, who were also being led by graduate students doing research in this area, worked in partnership with the middle school students to identify the specific problem of what was happening in their schools around health and nutrition. And they identified that the children in their schools were had very poor snacking patterns and were eating very unhealthy foods. So together they came up with the potential solution of setting up a fruit and vegetable stand after school where kids could come and trade out their unhealthy snacks for fruit and vegetables instead. Could also make purchase of things like an orange for a quarter, things like that. So they tested out that idea together and found that it worked. And so this was an amazing research and learning opportunity for our Penn students. It was an amazing learning and engagement opportunity for the youth at the schools. What they found actually was not just that the snacking patterns changed at the school by having this available, but the youth that were involved and actually coming up with that solution and running the business itself, their behavior changed even more, and they were able to even impact their families. So I know I'm not talking about the exact words that you use, but I'm trying to give the example of the type of what we've envisioned as a democratic partnership in this collaborative problem-solving approach, and why we've defined it as mutual benefit.
Great. We have several questions, so let me feed a couple to you.
Sure.
The first one, and she's kind of got a follow-up, is from Renee Sedlasek. Hopefully I said that wrong. Sorry, said that right. Sorry, Renee. But she was asking, has all of your academically based community service been aligned with Netter Center goals? Or do you have service learning projects being coordinated in other parts of the university that are not aligned with the goals? Or in other words, if faculty want to incorporate service learning that's not aligned with the Netter Center goals, what are their options?
Yeah, that's a great question. So academically based community service courses, actually, let me back up for just a minute here. The Netter Center is a central hub for university engagement with the community, but we are by no means the only hub or the only way that that faculty or staff or other partners get involved with the community. So a lot of folks do work through us, but a lot of work does happen outside of the Netter Center. We are very mission focused. So when faculty want to get involved, if they want their course to be academically based community service, or we want their course to be academically based community service, it does have to align with the goals and mission of the Netter Center. That being said, a lot of those courses, in fact, a great majority of those courses happen at the university assisted community school sites that we focus on because we have such a place-based focus. But they also happen at other community organizations in the area. And in recent years, some faculty have been particularly interested, for example, in the immigrant population of Philadelphia, which there are large concentrations of in other parts of Philadelphia, not West Philadelphia. And so a number of those faculty have been working together to invest in certain schools in South Philadelphia on some of those issues. And that work has been supported because it fits our overall mission and approach. Even though their work is not specifically focused in place at the schools where we have staff, students, and other resources. So that's one example of how it can go in a couple of different directions. There are other opportunities for faculty to be involved that are maybe aligned with the Netter Center and may provide some kind of technical assistance or support by the Netter Center, such as we provide transportation support for students getting out to the community sites and back. We also provide clearances for the students. We're required by the school district to have the child abuse and other clearances for any individuals that are working with minors. So we provide that kind of support with a focus on academically based community service, but also some level of support for a wider swath of faculty. And then, but with all of those cases, there has to be some kind of alignment with the vision and mission of the Netter Center itself. And to that point, we receive one opportunity for support we provide is actually course development grants. These are actually pretty small grants in the grand scheme of things. We provide grants up to $5,000 for individual faculty who want to either develop new academically based community service courses or want to take with a brand new idea for a course, or want to take an existing course and turn it into an academically based community service course. So we receive proposals and have a faculty review team that then gets recommended up to the director of the Netter Center to award those proposals. And if their vision does not align with the Netter Center, we don't award those grants. And so we usually have a few more proposals come in than we're either able to award or because of misalignment do not get awarded. And so that's one way that we ensure the faculty work through the Netter Center stays true to our mission.
Great, thank you. We have two questions that are, I think, somewhat related. One is related to the fact that so much of the anchor institution sort of scholarship and publication seems to focus on urban environments. And so this particular person is interested in where there might be good examples of rural institutions, and just more broadly how you see this framework working with within rural contexts. And then the second question is somewhat related, which is thinking about this in terms of a small private sort of liberal arts institution that maybe doesn't have the scope of a large public university, but maybe still has a pretty significant anchor institution role in the communities in which they're situated.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, those are great questions. So to be fair, I mean, my work and research has focused primarily on urban institutions. So I don't have readily available examples at the moment of other institutions that are more rural based. But I will speak to the work as a whole, which is around the idea of universities and colleges partnering with their local communities in however they define that. So I know that a lot of, for example, land grant institutions, they define their community as the state. And so in that case, there are differing levels of engagement across the entire state with a more focused concentration on some of the work that's going on in the community directly surrounding their campus. Sometimes that community also is not, I say directly surrounding the campus, sometimes it is indeed a bit farther than that, but it's the idea that taking a focused and strategic effort to invest in a particular community on these different aspects and concentrating on a place-based approach so that the resources can add up to something more. And so to that end, the idea of a small liberal arts institution, it's not about necessarily having big funds or big resources available. It's about taking what resources are available and helping to catalyze other resources and using those resources strategically in a focused way.
And I can speak from Utah. We have a small liberal arts college, Westminster College, here in Salt Lake City, and they've done a very wonderful job making a partnership with South Salt Lake City. And so there's a larger United Way funded initiative that's happening in South Salt Lake. And so they've found a way to be a really central partner to that much larger place-based initiative. And as a small college, they've made the choice to really commit their resources to that specific area. So
yeah, let us not forget that, I mean, our most significant resource on campus is human resources. So the staff and, sorry, I should start with students. The students, faculty, and staff, and even some cases alumni, working in partnership with community residents.
So there are a couple questions that I think are somewhat related, which is sort of how this anchor approach integrates non-anchor partners, so whether that be like residents in the neighborhoods, and I think you talked to some degree about that in your wonderful example of the nutritional program, but if you have other maybe examples where you could speak to that, and then also like local government and how that is really a part of the larger framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, so I think that there are numerous examples of different partners and different ways of engagement. And, I think one reason I wanted to use the Rutgers example was because of the way that they have co-convened folks from both the public and private side of Newark, including the Office of the Mayor and the local government, along with local residents and the institutions themselves. So I think they are a great example of how that has been done. And the University City District here is also representative of not just the large anchors, which we do have a large concentrations of eds and meds in our area, but also represents the local businesses in West Philadelphia and the residents themselves. So how that work looks on the ground can happen in numerous ways. Again, the work I know best is the work of the Netter Center, which has really focused on working with public school partners. So we have numerous examples beyond the nutrition program of focusing on things like STEM education and working with the teachers and the school district on not only working directly inside STEM classrooms, but also providing professional development, bringing the local youth to Penn's campus to be able to use the labs and other resources that we have available here, and making that part of an overall approach to a STEM program we have called Molus Access Science. Just a couple of examples. I'm happy to share more. But.
So we have time, I think, for one last question, and this is probably a good one to end on, which is, have you seen any downsides of the anchor approach? Like one that sort of surfaced for me as you were talking, and I think you sort of addressed this in your comments, but I think it could be certainly something that a campus could do without intending to, which is gentrification. But there might be some others that you've seen where, if not done with a lot of intention and intentionality and planning, could actually result in harm or just unintended outcomes. So if you want to finish with a response to that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Alexis. And thank you for priming my answer as well, because I do think you hit on one of the major concerns, and that would be that the type of anchor investment happens without ensuring that the long-term residents of the community themselves are true beneficiaries. And that is something that takes a lot of thought. And I actually think that a lot of this work, this anchor type of investment, when we really start talking about investing the full set of resources, the institutional resources in combination with academic and human resources, we do get into that zone that the work is actually fairly new, and the research and evaluation is actually still catching up in a lot of ways to ensure that is indeed the case, that the surrounding community and university both benefit, but the surrounding community, meaning the existing residents of that community, and that it's not just displacement. So I think that's definitely a major area that the work of the Anchor Institutions Task Force is paying a lot of attention to, and something that any institution engaging in this work needs to think very deliberately about. The other idea is just simply around that this work is so focused on relationships and partnerships. That's really what is so at the core. And that takes time and ongoing communication and patience, and really investment in that democratic approach that we were talking about. And so I love the question that did come about the ways that faculty get involved in the importance of aligning with mission, because it has been very important to us that we are seen as genuine partners out in the community, and this is especially true on urban campuses, but we have, and it's true here at Penn, that we have a troubled history to overcome. And so we're still working on that in some ways. We're still rebuilding some of that trust, and open communication and dialogue with the community. And so really emphasizing the role that relationships and genuine partnerships takes in this work, because without that, harm can be done. If the focus only becomes on the benefit for the faculty member and their research, or only on the benefit of the students and giving them at the campus and giving them an opportunity for service and civic development, then all of the work can be very much undermined. And so I think keeping a real focus on the importance of truly democratic and mutually beneficial partnerships and strategic focus on the work is key.
Great. Well, I think we're at time. We have a couple other questions that I'll just send to you electronically, Rita, and then we can respond to the individuals. I think it's maybe only one. Just on behalf of Campus Compact, specifically the compacts of Utah, California, and Mountain West, as well as all of our wonderful participants who asked great questions, we just want to thank you again for your time, and hopefully look forward to seeing you at conferences and other convenings, maybe even at the Anchor Task Force meeting in November in a few weeks. So again, thank you, Rita, and thanks everyone for your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and we'll see everyone soon.